Fnatic versus SK. Let's get into the matchups
El
proper.
Clasico.
El Clasico.
Please stop. Guys, it hasn't been El Clasico for years. Like, Trevor was around, and none of us cast League of Legends in that time. None of us can call it El Clasico. If you've been around since
I don't
then,
even know if I played League of Legends when El Clasico
I
was a
did.
thing.
But this is, so for context, this is Fnatic have never played a best of 5 versus SK since the start of the LEC. That's just 2019, 2020, and now 2021. So not a huge period of time, but this is an interesting matchup. Now, I want to go first to a Twitter question to kick off our conversation, because we had one very big fan of the podcast reach out, and SK Genax at Genax_law. What does SK have to do in order to beat Fnatic? Asking for a friend.
Just win your lane's forehead.
But
Just kill their Nexus.
Okay, for sure. But like, is this, when we look at this, I think a lot of people are going to be immediately super Fnatic favorite in this. Some of that's going to be history. Some of that's going to be pedigree. Some of that's going to be the fact that SK was really struggling in the final weeks. That said, Fnatic also, it was a rough final week. So what's your guys' read on this matchup?
Well, I think that the reason that ultimately I think Fnatic will crush this matchup. And the reason I believe that it's this way is because when you look at the best element of SK, it is their bot lane, for sure. And then you look at Fnatic's bot lane and like the amount of just pure obliteration they've done through the LEC, like SK win games when their bot lane is getting ahead either through 2v2 or bringing jungle involvement, like making the bot lane very explosive. And that's like their best play style. They don't really play towards top side in the early laning phase at all. Blue just sort of, does his job in mid lane. But I don't think they'll be able to break the Fnatic bot lane. And if you're not breaking the enemy bot lane as SK, opening up the map to allow treats to impact the rest, I just don't see a world where SK get to play the game plan that they're so good at. And yeah, I just think that Fnatic are too strong on the bottom side of the map for that to happen.
Yeah, and if I think of SK just throughout the regular split, every single game that they win, it feels like the start of the game they're losing in a way. It's like the only way they make the game winnable just by the clutch factor of the engages or the team fights, which is always a good thing if you're winning fights, but finding the leads is important. I think you're right. I think Fnatic it's almost like SK's kryptonite in a sense, where their bot lane is just winning and they have the most 2v2 kills in the league. And their only win condition for SK is bot lane in a sense, because I feel like the rest of them don't really show up. I think that the SK is so easy to shut down in the pick ban. I think if you take away things like TF, Thresh, and then first rotate a support like Rel or Alistar, and then you have an all-in bot like a Tristana lane, then it's really hard for SK to play. They can't really pick Kalista into Tristana lane. It might be too hard, might be too volatile.
Yeah.
Selfmade can sacrifice himself and be bot side. So yeah, I'm definitely favoring Fnatic in this matchup. I think SK for me hasn't been so impressive when it comes to being diverse. I think that they've been really one-dimensional in the way that they win games. So yeah, I think they might struggle unless it's been loads of time to practice, 2 weeks to scrim. Maybe they've got something new.
And statistically, SK are looking like the weakest team that has made it into playoffs, right? They are the only team with a deficit on average of about 10 and 15 minutes. They're not huge, but they are deficits. Schalke has one at 10, but actually has an okay size lead at 15. And when you look at it, you talk about those very specific picks, and like Jezu on Kalista, 9-1-4 over the course of the season, 15 minutes, he has 3.3k plus A. Like when he's playing Kalista and they get to pop off and he acts as an extra skate for treats, like they look so good. They look so dominant. That's where most of their explosive early games come from. But like you compare that to Jhin, which is the only other AD carry he has 3 games on, and he's quiet. He's doing very little. And also treats is much quieter comparatively because he doesn't have that Kalista to back him up, to follow him, to gain pretty much automatic lane priority. So if I'm SK, I'm sweating right now because there's no simple way out of this. And what worked for them in the regular season, going through bot lane, we've already talked about, clearly will not work against Fnatic, short of, some really grief moments from Hylissang, to be frank.
Yeah, and I think like both those points are super valid too, because you sort of saw like SK's draft priorities shift a little bit towards the end of the season, where it was a lot more the Jhin, and they had way less explosive 2v2s in the bot lane. And also like even looking deeper at the team stats of being behind at 10 and 15 minutes, like individually, each player was behind at 15 minutes too from the digging I did last night, which tells like it's not even like, they have like bot lane is like super popping off in the majority of their games or something like this. Like one of their biggest strengths was their bot lane, but also their team fighting. Like thought like even from deficits, SK's team fighting, and specifically the way that I thought Treats and Genax both operated together within fights was really solid. But I don't. That's not enough for me to have faith in them coming in here.
You also have to remember, like, and not to throw too much shade here, because again, I think that SK, like, I want to see SK shift and turn things around, but Bwipo's highlight Riven game where he absolutely monstered a team. Absolutely monstered was against Genax on Vladimir. Now, I don't think we're ever going to see that matchup again, but like the fact that that ever happened at all this season is like going to be a thorn in the side of SK, because it's like, you know, it's game 2, you're down 0-2, you're like, all right, guys, the mental's still strong, we're good. And then Blippo locks in Riven. And it's like, shout out to SK. If you can keep the mental strong when you're down 0-2 and game 3 Blippo locks in Riven, like, good on you. But I couldn't. I would break. I would just instantly be like, all right, I'm out. This is it. I'm done.
Yeah, and I think that these two teams are almost identical to each other. You know, you have like the really aggressive bot lanes, you have the farming junglers in a sense, mid lanes are more supportive, things like TF scaling mids, and then top lane is just like Renekton, Volibear, Gragas, which I think both of them have the most played on as well. So I think that SK is like Fnatic light in a sense, but I think that the way SK wins is obviously Fnatic's weakness, what their crutch is, what's holding them back and what's making them lose games, which is fighting too much. Like Fnatic take way too many fights. It's way too many unnecessary fights. They take way too many unnecessary dives. So if I'm SK in this matchup, I would pick more of a scaling approach, more of an XL approach in a sense. Not too much scaling, a little bit of early game on the support, obviously engage supports, make bot lane volatile, and then pick a more of a impactful jungle in the early game, which is very standard right now, and then let Fnatic play into you a little bit. If you have the aggressive plays and you can go for dives, go for them. But I think Fnatic might overreach, overstep, go for an aggressive dive, and they might ace themselves in a way. So I think Fnatic are their worst enemy in this matchup. So SK should just try to take advantage of that, not to overforce plays, but let them come into them and then just capitalize on the mistakes.